And
oh, hi, friends. Caught me napping. Bill Mays here. I'm in quarantine like you all. The other day, though, I decided to write some lyrics to the Battle Hymn of the Republic that echo my sentiments, and I hope it cheers you up, and let's get through this thing together. Here we go. We practice social distancing and stay 6 feet away. We wear our masks, use Clorox wipes to keep the germs at bay. We wash our clothes and scrub our hands 3 dozen times a day as we go marching on. The parks are closed, the pools are shut, they've even closed the sea. We take a walk and ride a bike so we won't atrophy. We're quarantined except to shop for meds and grocery as we go marching on. Keep your spirits up, keep smiling. Count your blessings, start compiling. Please no more TP stockpiling. We must keep marching on.
those were the days.
We've binged on Netflix, Amazon, old television shows. We've reread books and magazines and poetry, plays and prose. We're tired of Broadway pop and opera on our stereos, so we keep trudging on. Our lives are interrupted, we miss family and friends. We're weary, disconnected, and we're feeling at wit's ends. We waited out, though full of doubt, as all of life suspends. But let's keep marching on. Got to kill coronavirus. I wanna work, let's hope they'll hire us. Doctors, Birx, and Fauci say don't fire us. Let's kill COVID-19. Let's keep on staying clean. Goodbye, COVID-19. Take care.
Wait, I think the public deserves to actually see that, so I'm going to play it again. So here's that again.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, I moved into it with a song in my heart.
Oh, okay. Some of the same lyrics.
Yeah, but it's a different style.
Are we audible to the audience right now?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
Would you like to say anything?
hi, everybody. Hearing occasional glitches in the music, as on the last track. I don't know if it's on my end or
Oh, I think
little dropout.
it's not on my end, so people out there aren't hearing it. I think it's
Could be on my
on.
end.
Yeah,
I'm out in the country.
kind of a weird aspect of it. This is a really beautiful song.
I love the verse on this. That's why I included it. I'm not nuts about the album cover. Listen.
ring. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Isn't Joe LaBarba just one of the best drummers ever?
Ever.
And I love him so much as a
Go
person.
choose you up, and let's get this thing together. Here
Yep.
we go.
He is one of the best drummers ever. And a
He's a
hell of a guy.
he's a funny guy too, and it comes through in his playing, his humor and his impishness.
Impish.
Good Scrabble word, huh?
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my friend Bill Mays, and I say that it was a long time ago that he lived here, and but it was the good old days, you know.
The bad old days. It was a mix.
Really, did you think it was some of the bad old days?
Well, to be perfectly honest, when I was deep in my addiction out there, it was the bad old days. As a recovering alcoholic, the good old days started in recovery. But too much information, maybe, but it's the truth. Uh, there were many, many wonderful aspects of living in Los Angeles, not the least of which was the weather. I'm a beach person, and that's why I spend 6 months of the year in Florida now and 6 months in the Northeast. But I loved being in the ocean and being near the ocean. And I loved the work I was doing out there because it was such a mix, an eclectic mix between studio work and playing with some of my favorite jazz musicians. Not enough, but when I could. And that's one of the reasons I left LA and moved to New York, to have a wider live playing experience with people back here that I wouldn't maybe have gotten to work with had I stayed out there.
Yeah.
But it was a great 15 years that I was there, from 69 to 84.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That actually was a good time here. Um, I mean, it's a good time now, but just has a whole different flavor and a whole different group of people playing,
Well,
obviously.
there was still a lot of people there from the Central Avenue scene.
Mm,
Carmel Jones comes to mind, Buddy Collette, with
yeah.
whom I got to work, and many others. And of course, I got to play a lot with Bud Shank and Bobby Shue a lot while I was there in their bands. And yeah, it's a wonderful time. I had some great trios out there too. I remember one with Danny Embry and Putter Smith, no drums.
There you
That was
go.
a group.
Yeah, really nice, right?
Mulberry Street, remember that?
I do. That was an amazing spot.
Alan Goldman owned it. I can't believe I remember his name. It was in Studio City.
Yeah. And that is not the Alan Goldman who owns the G Spot, ladies and gentlemen. It was a different Alan
The
Goldman.
G Spot?
Yes, Alan
Wait, there's a
Goldman.
club called the G Spot?
Yes. Uh, if you come out here, you should play there. It's Alan Goldman is he's a funny
That's
musician
wonderful.
guy who made a lot of money outside of music, and he had bought a house in Highland Park years ago when it was cheap, and then started adding on, and then he has had a rehearsal band there with Bill Perkins for years, and like 20 years every week, and so anyway, the space is really, really beautiful. Home venue, gorgeous piano, 9 foot German piano, and so we have concerts there. And but he's such a funny guy that Alan Goldman. He calls it the G spot.
Right.
And of course there's jokes like it's hard to find, and stuff like that. And but it's a really wonderful venue. Really,
And
really wonderful.
Highland Park,
Highland Park, yeah.
just near Pasadena, if I remember right.
Yeah, right between Pasadena and LA.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, yeah, but that's not the same Alan Goldman.
No,
Yeah. Yeah, that was what's his name? The Brazilian who worked there. You're- I want to say Ivan Lins, but that wasn't in. Who was living here? Dori Caymmi. He worked there. Remember?
Yeah, no, I hadn't remembered that Dory was living there. I remember Moacir Santos
Yeah,
living there and playing with him a little bit,
he was
recording her
a
song.
beautiful soul.
Yes, had a beautiful color to his skin. He was blue black. Remember that about him.
Yeah, such a wonderful writer and community person, yeah, right? He was
Hmm.
really great. Um, yeah, and there was Glenn Garrett was worked there a lot at that time.
Glenn Garrett,
Do you remember him? He's a horn player.
trombonist,
Huh?
trombonist.
No, he's
No,
woodwind.
no, I don't remember him.
Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm on early, and we just kind of shifted because Bill had something to do. And let's see, I have Joyce Glasgow, who's a fan from Seattle. She's a jazz fan and artist. Taylor Hatch, who's a young guitarist from UNT. And she wants to hear the COVID song again. So we will play that next again. And Dan Davila has given me your 371 all music credits. And I should have had your book by near me, but you probably have a copy of it. But I enjoyed that book.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun writing it. Well, I actually wrote it over the course of 50 years. I started taking notes and I never threw my date books away. And every time a funny thing would happen in the music business, I would jot it down and put it in a shoebox because I thought at some point I'm going to write a pamphlet at least. And sure enough, I guess it was about 7 years ago when I had 55 years in the music biz, as is in the title. I lay in the hammock down in my gazebo by the lake and wrote it over the course of the summer, or assembled all the, and I looked at my date books to refresh my memory, and I looked at LPs that I'd played on to refresh my memory. Who did I record with back in those days? So it was a labor of love, and also, and I say this to encourage people to buy it, I decided early on to give all the proceeds to the Musicians Emergency Relief Fund, even before COVID hit. And so that's been a pleasure to give the money, the proceeds to that. But it's a fun book. It's as you know, it's stuff that's unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up, kind of things. You know, what can I say unless I read it to y'all? And I
Yeah,
can,
it's pretty funny. You'll have to read a few things. We have a few questions already. So Taylor has a tough arranging question for you.
yeah.
Um, when it comes to orchestration, what is helpful when it comes to creating smooth voice leading?
Oh my goodness, smooth voice leading. You know, when I arrange for saxophones, well, that's more a voicing thing, voice leading. I have a lot of experience listening to great arrangements from great arrangers like Nelson Riddle, Billy May, Gordon Jenkins, uh, and more recently Bob Mintzer and Maria Schneider, people like that. And I think that what's given me success in good voice leading is simply all the listening experience that I have. And somehow it comes through in a subconscious way.
Hmm.
And to get more technical, I'd encourage, was it Taylor?
Yes. Uh-huh.
To email me at billamays@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to get more specific with some printed material.
There you go, Taylor. A real answer to a real question.
A nutshell answer. A subject that we could talk about for many hours, of course.
I have Mark Baldrich here as well, and he's seen you perform with several jazz organizations in Florida. Oh,
Oh,
oh, yeah. I'm not sure if he saw you perform or he sees that you have performed. Have you ever performed with the Fort Pierce Jazz and Blues Society?
no, I haven't, but they've contacted me.
Well, there you go. All right. I also have your credits, but oh, this is a Taylor type of question. What's the biggest piece of advice someone gave you?
Well, this sounds like I'm being funny, but I'm not. Jimmy Rolls told me once when he got me the gig or steered me in the direction of the gig with Sarah Vaughan, he said, one of the keys to being a good piano accompanist is when you think of an idea, play half of it. And there's a tremendous amount of truth there. That's one of the things that always stayed with me. And of course, I said to Jimmy, well, which half? And we laughed. And Jimmy was not a good explainer. Jimmy either couldn't or wouldn't explain things. What he did tell me to do was come and watch him play, and I did. I was living in San Diego at the time. I hadn't yet moved to Los Angeles. And I used to go up and hear him with Monty Budwig and Nick Martinez
Yeah.
At various places. And I would watch him, sit close enough to watch his hands and watch how he touched the keys and talk about voice leading. There was a guy who had a wonderful way of moving from chord to chord. Wonderful, unique harmonic sense, and a very individualistic way with the pedal, as did Hank Jones, and whom I used to go and watch and pay particular attention to their pedaling. It might seem that pedaling is just kind of an obvious thing that sort of comes naturally, but it doesn't. And there are some fine players who are not necessarily great pedalers.
What, I mean, I've heard people say don't use the pedal hardly at all. What do you think makes great pedaling?
Well, there again, and I have a 2-page worksheet that I'm happy to share with people about this. Basically, it has to do when we're talking about the right pedal, the sustain pedal, with quickly lifting and then depressing it again at the very right moment. Because if you don't do it at the right moment, you'll get ring over from the preceding chord, and or you'll get a break in the sound. So that's the first basic rule. And also your success at good pedaling also depends on how well the sustain pedal is or isn't regulated. And that's something that a tuner can take care of. But I've had pedals that were so ill regulated that I had to put a small book down in front of them. But talking about not using the pedal, I was in a concert hall once where the sustain pedal didn't work and we couldn't get a technician in time. And that was hell to get a good smooth legato on ballads without the pedal.
Yeah.
So I actually called in to play my past experience studying the pipe organ, believe it or not, which the way we play the organ, at least the pipe organ in classical literature, that helped me get through that. And then there are times when the pedal assembly falls off in the middle of the concert. That's happened. Then there's the time that happened at the Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City, place that you've probably played, where the pedal went down and didn't come up, as did several of the keys. I was late for the gig. It was a casual. And I came in about 10 minutes late. The band had started. The grand piano was still covered up. And I joined in and I hit a few notes and the keys and the pedal stuck and wouldn't play. So at the end of the tune, something was dreadfully wrong. At the end of the tune, I lifted the lid, and overturned on the tenor strings of the piano was a huge plate of spaghetti and meatballs, which had, don't ask me how it got there. It had been there long enough to dry thoroughly. I did the only thing one could. I said, waiter, would you please bust this piano? And he did, and cleaned it up, and we continued. That's only happened once in 63 years.
The being late part or the food on the piano?
The food and the piano. The being late part has happened occasionally, but seldom. And I've only missed one gig with Jimmy Witherspoon, darn it.
Oh
I
my
was so
God.
looking forward to it. It wasn't my fault. That's a funny story about a driver who went that way instead of that way. And 2.5 hours later, we realized we were not only in the wrong town, but in the wrong state.
Oh God. My God.
Yeah.
That definitely wasn't your fault.
You know, all's well that ends well. The drummer, Les DeMerrill, who booked the gig and set up the drummer for Ron McClure and I to get a ride down to Manalapan, New Jersey. Les went out in the audience and said, the bassist and pianist can't get here. Is there a bass player in the house? And there was, and his bass was in the car. I forget, it might have been Gary Mazzarapi, come to think of it. He came in and did the gig. And it happened to be a town right near Tal Farlow's town. And they called Tal. He was home and not working. And Tal came and saved the day.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
That's one of those things. It's like too unbelievable to be true, but it is.
Yeah.
I've spoken to Les on this show. It was fun to hook up with him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's having a good time in Florida.
Oh, he's in Florida.
Yeah, he's on an island.
Marco Island.
Let's see. He
Oh, wow.
also he does a jazz festival too. Les DeMerrill. Les DeMerrill. Yeah, you drive right by it. It's oh shoot.
Well, maybe you'll send me his info later and I'll
Yeah,
track him down.
Les DeMerrill. Yeah,
It's amazing the number of musicians that are living in Florida, retired and still working, and a lot of people from the, New York area that live down there.
yeah. Yeah, people are moving all over the place. A lot of people that you know from here, like older people who have been here for a long time. They're moving to Nashville.
Oh,
Bunch of people moving to Nashville. Um,
land of the figured bass.
yeah, you know Calabria, Foti, and Bob McChesney. They
I
moved.
know her work and I know Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, they moved, and
Yeah. Oh.
anyway, much to my dismay.
In addition to being a fine singer, is she not also a concert mistress, a violinist?
Yes, true.
Yeah.
Yep, she's a great singer too. Beautiful singer. And of course, Bob is kind of a premier trombonist, and they arrange really beautifully too. Really, they
Yeah.
put out some beautiful records. You
Yeah, I
know.
just saw Bob the other night on YouTube with Hans Groener.
You did? Wow, he was a guest with Hans.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Wow.
Mr.
I,
Groener was assessing Bob's latest trombone efforts in his new CD, and it was all they both could do to keep from breaking up.
oh, I have to see that. Oh my God, I got to see
I
that.
sent the monk thing that Larry Goldings did, the Hans Groener, to somebody the other day, and they didn't get it. I had to explain it. They weren't real musicians. No, they weren't. But I think that's some of his most hilarious stuff. Correcting Monk,
Yeah, I think so
up
too.
with the notes that Monk should have and really meant to write.
Yeah, Larry Goldings he's
Oh,
quite the character. and
Oh,
brilliant
wonderful.
player. But it just makes it really fun that he's he's
Oh,
quite the
it's
character.
wonderful. Yeah.
Um, let's see. Here's a good question from Taylor. And Mike Steffens is a big Bob Brookmeyer influenced person as well. But Taylor would like to know how Bob was a huge influence to you.
Well, he was an influence in listening to his music, studying his scores in great detail in a book that I hope you know about, Taylor, called Inside the Score. It's one of the Bibles for arrangers. And then I had the pleasure to study with Bob Brookmeyer and Manny Album at the BMI Writers Workshop in New York years
Uh-huh.
ago. I never took private lessons with Bob.
Yeah.
I remember one of the challenging assignments from Bob that ended up being a 20-bar song of mine called Fireflies on my Summer Sketches album. Bob said, go home and write a melody based on a C diatonic scale, change the rhythms throughout the piece. Don't use a common form, like don't make it be a 8-8-8-8 AABA form,
Yeah.
and bring it in tomorrow. So that was one of my memories with Bob. I got to play a bit with Bob in small groups. This is a great story. One of those, you can't make this stuff up. We were playing at Fat Tuesdays, the east side of Manhattan, no longer there. A club that had a very low ceiling with recessed lights. And Bob on the bandstand, it was a low ceiling. And of course, Bob was 6'4" or 6". He was a tall guy. And he was playing, and he was in the middle of a solo, and he had a silk shirt on, and over his left shoulder, the shirt started smoking because he was that far from the light. And my wife shouted as Bob was starting to smoke, "Bob, you're smoking!" And he stopped playing and yelled, "I know!" and kept playing. She said, "No, you're about to catch fire." And he stopped playing and noticed it and went like that. And she saved the day.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Huh?
Yeah. See, shouldn't really be too tall.
Couldn't play clubs with low ceilings with recessed lighting. That happened in a club on La Brea. I was working with Maxine Weldon, the
Yeah.
singer,
Yeah.
and she had a big afro. And no, she didn't. Well, she might have had an afro. It was that time. Some customer had an afro and was digging Maxine's singing and had her head down and was bobbing, and there were lit candles on the table, and her hair did catch on
Oh,
fire.
jeez.
We took the coda.
Oh my God. That reminded me of
Right, the stories are as great as the on bandstand experiences.
So, looking at your credits here, there's a lot of credits that you have. Have you seen the All Music stuff?
I haven't. No.
So All Music, you can take stuff in, you can put stuff in and take it out. I'll go slower. I'm just going down to the bottom.
Well, I see they have albums,
Yeah.
years, leader. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, I mean, this is a whole bunch of
Yeah.
names that people know. I'm just gonna mention a few. You can stop me. Red Mitchell, Percy Faith, Marlena Shaw, Maxine Weldon, Woody Herman, Andy Williams, Leonard Cohen, Bill Toll, Barry Manilow, Bud Shank, Manhattan Transfer, Frank Zappa. Roland, I don't know if you're listening. I have a Zappa fan who always comes. Bob Magnuson, Louis Jordan, Shelly Manne, Mark Murphy, Freddie Hubbard, Lou Tabakin. Oh, you did quite a few with Barry Manilow, huh? And
5 or 6 of his hit records, and then a jazz record that we can talk about or not.
yeah, Gordon Brisker, Phil Woods, Morgana King, Ray Drummond, Diane Moore, Roberto Carlos, Dave Mackay. Oh, you were on the win.
Well, no, that he
Oh,
what
you composed something?
he recorded one of my tunes at one time. I know.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Little Richard, Sheila Jordan.
yeah,
Cool. Alan Mezquita,
mosquito. Yeah,
Max Groove, Jeff Jarvis, Mike Wooford. I guess you composed something for him. Um,
yeah,
Carly Simon. Some of these people I'm not familiar with. Gerry Mulligan. Yeah,
yeah. Well, I've been doing it a long time.
I would say so. It looks like there's two things of Little Richards.
Well, I never worked with Little Richard, but I was on a TV show with him, and we might have done something at the piano together,
Oh,
if memory serves. I
yeah.
also did a show with who's the guy that Great Balls of Fire, Jerry Lee Lewis,
Uh,
who had a $200,000 Bosendorfer concert grand with the extra keys. And he did his shtick. And when he started playing the keyboard with his boots, oh, what? You're doing that to that piano?
yeah, that wouldn't be that would be upsetting. Terry Clark Trio, Ann Hampton Calloway. I heard a funny story about Bud Shank. Well, it wasn't exactly about Bud Shank. It was about Steve Laspina. You must play with Steve, right?
I played a lot with Steve back in the day. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard this. I interviewed him last week, and he said so he was in Chicago, and he was young, and he was thinking of going to New York. And let's see, who was it? Who was the main guy? Let's see, there was Bud.
Jim Hall. Oh,
Well,
no.
the person, I think it was actually the guitarist, not Jim Hall,
Peter Bernstein or before his time there.
older guy. This was like when Steve was 20 or something.
Les Paul.
No, but somebody like that. He's like the big guy.
Bucky Pizzarelli.
No, anyway, it was one of those guys whose name probably will come back to me, and Steve said, I've been thinking about going to New York. Do you think I should? And he said, let's have breakfast after the gig. So so the breakfast was included Ray Brown and Bud Shank, and so they were having breakfast. He said he even got up and called his dad and said, you won't believe who I'm having breakfast with. His father said, I'll be right down. He said, no, you won't. And anyway, they all said, you should move to New York. And so that year, a few months later, he moved to New York.
Oh, great story.
Yeah.
Hey, to follow up on the question somebody asked, what's the best piece of advice someone ever gave you? Bud Shank and Shelly Manne both gave me some good advice. When I was considering moving to New York, I was very active in the studios and working 6 and 7 days a week. My career had not dipped in that part of the business. And many of my fellow musicians thought I was crazy to consider leaving it. And Bud and Shelly said, do it. Go back and mix it up and see what happens. You've got the stuff and, go ahead. They were very encouraging. But, come to think of it, Bud and Shelly were two of very few studio musicians, at least back then, who led double lives as busy, successful studio players and also would be willing to turn down studio dates and go out on the road for 2 weeks. Or who would, who had dual careers. And of course, Shelly had his clubs, the two manholes. But it was, as I remember, many people, including Dennis Budemer, the great guitarist, and Chuck DeMonico, the bassist, great jazz players who said, I won't take a jazz gig. I'm a studio player. I'm ensconced in it. That's what I do 24/7. I'm not. And so different strokes. But, and then when I came to New York, I saw that there was a great mixing of the two camps. In fact, funny story, I met Mel Lewis and he called me a few weeks later to do a club date. Well, I said, Mel, I've done casuals out in Los Angeles. I don't really want to get into the club date scene here. He said, come on, man. He said, it'll pay great and you'll be amazed at who you see there. So I took it and I walked in and there was Bill Crow on bass, Eddie Bird on trombone, and Jerome Richardson on flute, and all great jazz players. So I said, okay, you can rest your case.
Probably not doing, here's your booty kind of song anyway, right?
Yeah, it was a standards kind of gig,
Yeah.
but it proved the point that there was a great mixing of, do a studio date, do a club date, and tomorrow I got a wedding followed by the Thad Jones Mel Lewis band at the Vanguard.
Yeah, it's great. Who did you accompany as far as singers went?
Well, dozens. The longest tenure was 14 months with Sarah Vaughan back in 1972, 73. And it was a wonderful trio. It was Bob Magnuson and Jimmy Cobb.
Hmm.
And what's not to love there?
Yeah.
A couple of times we got to work with Duke Ellington's band, which was a great experience, and got some funny stories out of that. I worked a lot with Ann Hampton Calloway here in New York, mostly as an arranger for several of her albums. In the pop field, I worked with Barry Manilow, as you mentioned, on 5 or 6 of his hit records, mostly playing Fender Rhodes and clavinet and accessory keyboards. And his last album with Arista Records was called Paradise Cafe,
Yeah.
which was, as he put it, his jazz album. He hired jazz musicians that he loved, Shelly Manne, Mundell Lowe, George DeVivier, myself, and Gerry Mulligan. And he did all music that he'd written to Johnny Mercer lyrics. And it's a beautiful album. When October Goes was one of the hits from that particular album.
I remember that album. Yeah.
And then I worked, a lot with singers where it was just a week here, a week there, or in the case of Placido Domingo, 5 minutes. And it was, I was subbing for Mike Renzi at Radio City Music Hall at a rehearsal. So I got to do 5 minutes with Placido. And I also got to work with Andrea Bocelli on a television show, and the big guy, Pavarotti, also on a TV show. So those were fun experiences to be in that world for a minute.
Yeah. How is that different for you than like doing something with Sarah, for instance,
Well, for Pavarotti, I was playing a written part where there was no improvising. I was part of a small orchestra. With Bocelli, it was solo, and it was a Christmas carol. It was, I can't remember. And he was apologetic because he said, I don't do it in the standard key. I think it was Silent Night. He said he hadn't brought a chart, and I said, no problem, we'll do it in whatever key you like. Sarah Vaughan had a book that was about that thick with wonderful arrangements by everybody from Bob James to Ernie Wilkins to Bill Homan to Michel Legrand. And sadly, she would only do, I think in the 14 months I was with her, she would do the same 40, 45 tunes. it was hard to get her to, I'd be leafing through the book. Oh, couldn't we try this thing that by Michelle? And no. But then when she did that wonderful album and with huge orchestra that Michel Legrand wrote and conducted, she started doing more of his music. She was great fun. So it was a ball to be with her. She would often bring her sewing machine on the road, and she liked to hang after the concert, and we'd go to her room and have gin and tonics and play Spill and Spill, a word game, and she would sew. And she was really one of the boys. She was a very happy person at that time because she was in love with her road manager, Marshall Fisher. And so she was emotionally in a really good place at that time.
Pretty cool, man.
Yeah. She, her big hit way back in the day was Broken Hearted Melody, right?
My husband and I got together because of that song.
Oh, okay. I got to hear your story. And Gus Mancuso was on bass. I wasn't there, but this is a famous story. And she would often take requests from the audience. So somebody's called out Broken Heart. She's, it's been so long, I don't know if I can remember all the lyrics. And Gus says from the bass, he says, go ahead, Sass, I know all your material. So she starts singing it, and she gets to the bridge and forgets the lyric and turns around, hopefully to Gus, help me out. And he goes, D7, D flat 7.
Is that where that joke came from?
Oh, I heard it.
That's funny, man.
She hit the deck.
Broken Hearted Melody. I'm just going to tell the short story because nobody's ever brought that up before on this. So my husband was not a jazz person. He was more of a rock and blues person, collecting lots of records. But that record he knew. And when he met me at the Money Tree, I don't know if you remember the Money Tree.
Toluca Lake.
Yep. So I had a student workshop going there, performance workshop, and of course nobody was in the audience, but he would come in there because he lived on one side and he worked at NBC, which was on the other side, and so he asked me if I knew that song, and I actually didn't. I didn't know that song. And so then the next week he brought me the lyrics, and the next week after that, it was an excuse to get me into his car so that he could play me this Broken Hearted Melody.
Oh, yeah.
The story goes on, but I won't bore everybody.
That's great.
Broken Hearted Melody.
Got that hit. What was Rosemary Clooney's Come On to My House?
Yeah. There were these, I
worked 3 weeks in Australia. I was a baby. I think I had just gotten out of the Navy, and Paul Moore, her pianist, fell sick, and I was asked by her drummer, Jim Plank, who was working with her and was a friend of mine. I was asked to sub for Paul. So that was fun to go to Australia, Sydney.
Wow, very nice. Hey, okay, so let's play the COVID-19 song again, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so here we go.
And I should say I wrote that early in COVID because there's a reference to Dr. Burke's there as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard a lot of early references. Here
Yeah.
we go. By the way, I like your singing.
Oh, hi, friends. Caught me napping. Bill Mays here. I'm in quarantine like y'all. The other day, though, I decided to write some lyrics to the Battle Hymn of the Republic that echo my sentiments, and I hope it cheers you up, and let's get through this thing together. Here we go. We practice social distancing and stay 6 feet away. We wear our masks, use Clorox wipes to keep the germs at bay. We wash our clothes and scrub our hands 3 dozen times a day as we go marching on. The parks shows. The pools are shut. They've even closed the sea. We take a walk and ride a bike so we won't atrophy. We're quarantined except to shop for meds and grocery as we go marching on. Keep your spirits up, keep smiling. Count your blessings, start compiling. Please, no more TP stockpiling. We must keep marching on. We've binged on Netflix, Amazon, old television shows. We've reread books and magazines and poetry, plays and prose. We're tired of Broadway pop and opera on our stereos, so we keep trudging on. Our lives are interrupted. We miss family and friends. We're weary, disconnected, and we're feeling at wits' ends. We waited out, though full of doubt, as all of life suspends. But let's keep marching on. Got to kill coronavirus. I wanna work, let's hope they'll hire us. Doctors Birx and Fauci say don't fire us. Let's kill COVID-19. Let's keep on staying clean. Goodbye, COVID-19. Take care.
Okay. Nice enough.
I like it. Fauci just retired.
I didn't know that. No.
Dave?
I think he might have heard this. A friend of a friend here in my neck of the woods was close to Fauci and supposedly got it to him. So no more TP stockpiling. That shows you how far it goes back.
That was like, yeah, and people were so paranoid about that, running out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still wear my mask whenever I'm on a plane or in a big gathering.
Sue Mascaleras said
Hi, Sue.
she thinks she remembers this song. Just so you know. Okay, Taylor has another question. When you listen to young composers, what do you think they lack when you first hear them?
Well, the ones that I've heard and coached, they lack a lot of listening experience. They're not that familiar with the tradition. And they lack eclecticism in their listening, like along with jazz, they need to go and listen to Mahler and Ravel too.
Okay.
And part of the reason that I discover with many of these people who haven't listened enough is there's just not enough time, and there's just too much material out there and available. It's a blessing and a curse. So one of our jobs as mentors is to wade through it all and tell them which Ravel to start with, which Mahler piece to start with, which Nelson Riddle.
Yeah.
Which go hear Marty Page and his work with the high-lows, just to throw another one out.
Yeah. Yesterday, I sat in on a song with Brent Fisher's band, which has Claire Fisher's music and his music. Talk about some great, incredible writing, just, oh my God, it's stunning, really gorgeous. Claire Fisher and Brent as well. Just beautiful stuff.
I don't know him, but I knew Claire. And by the way, I have to compliment you on a beautiful rendition of Pensativa.
Oh, thanks.
That was wonderful. That whole album with with Josh Nelson and Larry Kuntz.
Thank you.
The maturity exhibited by those two to play so understatedly yet deeply it just blew me away. It's one of the best things I've heard in a long while. I mean that sincerely.
Thank you. Yeah, they are so magnificent together. They're
Who wrote the lyric
for
to
Pensativa. Claire.
he did.
Yeah, he wrote those lyrics. Beautiful lyrics. Um, and it's kind of sad, which I always felt a little difficult about singing because the melody, the music I thought was a little more uplifting, but the lyric is kind of dark, you know. But but he wanted those lyrics, and but I really, the three of us came up with these different arrangements because of our musical relationship, you know. So the fact that we made it into a waltz was really beautiful, and then we extended a little bit of the bridge, and yeah, it was
Right.
working with those guys is very special.
Excuse me. When you work with those particular two guys, it's a real collaborative effort, is it?
Yeah, yeah,
That's always fun when you can have that experience, because
always.
as
Yeah,
an arranger, I've often had that, and I've often had it be the other way, where uh, the artist spoon feeds me what he or she wants. And that's okay, and it presents a different kind of challenge.
yeah. I know. I know just what you mean. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. It's well, the Dreamsville project was one of my favorite projects, probably because of what you just said. You know, we were all working together. Like September in the Rain, we thought that was the last song we picked because we thought, you know, we really should have a swing tune on. And we played through it swing, and we all went, no, it's not going to swing. And so we had a little different treatment, right? Because it just grew out of the other stuff. But
Wonderful.
yeah, um, it's interesting. I have always found it interesting over the years of relationships with musicians and arrangements, especially for recording, which usually arrangements occur because of recordings. And it's I remember Denise Donatelli once, you know, she was starting to get super popular, and I said, "Wow, this is great. So what's the greatest thing?" She said, "I have great arrangements, you know, incredible arrangements." I said, "What's the worst thing?" She said, "I have incredible arrangements." So it's like, yeah, I can really understand that because you have these great arrangements, they happen, they're beautiful, and then how many times after that do you perform them? You know, so
Right. Yeah. Speaking of September in the Rain, I have to interject. You made an album with a pianist who's come to be one of my favorites. His name's Philip Strange, or Phil Strange.
really, oh, how
A lot
nice.
of people don't know. I am constantly bringing his name up to music friends of mine here in New
Wow.
York who don't know about him. I first heard him on a record by a Japanese singer named Nanami Morikawa, I think is her last,
Yeah, I know that name.
based in, she's married to bassist Jamie Owsley in Miami. And Phil and she made a duo album. But you've made several things with him. I've heard them all, and I loved, you gave the trio free reign. You didn't sing on it, and they did an arrangement of September in the Rain that is stunning.
It is beautiful.
Folks, you ought to check that out. I mean, the whole album's great, but especially that trio. Was that Peter Erskine on drums on that
Yeah,
particular?
and Mark Johnson on bass.
And Mark Johnson, yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was beautiful.
that, compositionally, they just took a piece of the melody and reworked it and interjected it here and there on different pitch levels, different rhythms. It showed me the compositional mind of each of the three of those people. It was brilliant.
That's so nice to hear. I really don't hear people say that they know Phil, and he's he's really an incredible player, incredible musician. He taught me a lot over the years because we traveled for over 20 years together in Japan mostly.
And that
And
brings up, I'm sorry, brought up another question I had for you. Um, I know he's based in Osaka now,
yeah,
and I read somewhere that you had been in performed in every major city in Japan, and I was quite taken with that. That's a lot of work in Japan.
yes, we performed a whole lot there. Let's see, I first went to Japan in the early 80s, maybe, and then I the second time I went there, I met a man from Kobe who owned a music school and who booked people, and he and Phil worked for him. He was living there already, and so this guy just put us on the road together, and turned out to be a really good choice. And we traveled 3 times a year for 10 years in Japan. We
Oh,
just in the car. We were in the car listening to music and traveling, from the north to the south. So yeah, we saw a lot of Japan together.
yeah.
Had a lot of funny stories, you can imagine.
Oh, my first time in Japan was with the Percy Faith Love Orchestra.
I saw that band. I don't know if you were in it, but I and I thought, "Oh my God, this was so it was such corny arrangements at that time, and the audience loved it."
Oh,
Was it
well,
corny arrangements when you were in it?
some of his arrangements were beautiful and not corny, in the style of Andre Kostelanetz,
Uh,
let's say, uh, to pick a comparison. Uh, and there were some that were sort of corny. Um, but I worked on a number of Percy Faith's orchestral albums. In fact, he recorded one of my songs
oh,
featuring Tommy Tedesco, the great guitarist, playing the solo on. It was a piece called Euterpe. Euterpe was one of the Greek goddesses of music and poetry, and I had been working on Percy's albums as a sideman, and he asked me one day if I ever composed, and I said yes. And he said, "Bring me some of your things," and he liked this piece, and he did a beautiful arrangement of it and recorded it. And then I went to Japan on this multi-city tour about 1975, and with a large orchestra. Earl Palmer was the
uh,
drummer, um, and I wouldn't say the arrangements were corny. I mean, Summer Place, they were very appealing to a mass audience, as his records were, purposefully so. Columbia Records and Percy Faith hit a gold mine when they came up with that. He would take tunes of the day, and he would make interesting arrangements on them. Consumer, very
what was one or two of his big hits?
well, Summer Place
Oh,
with the triplet, the
that, that,
12/8 triplets in the
yeah,
piano.
yeah.
Yeah. And but he would take a wide variety of material. Like, I mean, he took the theme, the ragtime piece from The Entertainer. He took Freddie Hubbard's tune First Light. In
Oh,
fact, if I may, there's a quick, very funny story about that. I was going to play on that. I played on that record, and Percy tells me on a Friday, we'd been recording tunes for this particular LP, and he said, "Bill, on Monday, we're going to record Freddie Hubbard's First Light." And I said, "Oh, great, good tune." And he said, "Yeah," he said, "I'm going to feature you." And he said, "It's going to be 8 bars of D minor and 8 bars of E minor, something like that, something very simple and basic like that." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "So I want you to be thinking about your solo over the weekend." So that a jazzer he wasn't. "I want you to be thinking about your
that's
solo over the weekend."
funny.
Isn't that funny? It was
See,
precious.
and I'm sorry if I was insulting by saying it was corny, but when I saw it, there were some great jazz players on the gig, and um,
Oh,
the like there would be these solis that were written for two woodwinds, and they were playing. They would get up and play thirds, and
Oh,
I was like, I thought it was I thought it was a
wow.
joke or something. I thought,
Yeah.
is this really happening? You know, and it was really happening, and that's why I say it was just like. But the audience was totally enamored. They loved the band. A lot of people
Yeah.
they just listened
Oh,
and
yeah, huge
clapped.
audiences. And interestingly, people would come up to me after the concert and they would have one or two of the jazz albums that I'd recorded to date. I mean, I had only recorded a couple by the mid 70s under my own name, and they had them and they'd ask me to autograph them. So it shows you the eclectic taste of the Japanese and the huge mix of the people that came to his concerts.
Yeah, yeah,
And he also had the good wisdom to hire wonderful jazz musicians because everybody got a solo over the course of the night. Remember he had, uh, uh, Lou Tabakin was on one of those on that tour, and various other people.
yeah. My friend Dan has wants me to ask you, and if not, I will send it to you. Did you hear the my latest CD that I released with Phil live in Japan in 1992?
No, that's on the list. I know about
I'll have to
that.
I'll
Yes.
send that to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, and that's really cool to hear because you can. I mean, and Phil he's gotten more and more brilliant, just as time has gone on. I mean, and
Yes.
he's very fortunate because he's lived in Japan for so long, and he he was kind of stubborn in the way that he was going to play how he wanted to play, which was kind of Keith Jarrety, you know, and um, I can't tell you how many times the manager would come and say, "Play standards," and we'd say, "We are playing standards," you know. And but anyway, he's very fortunate because he has set himself up in that country for to
Yeah.
yeah, and then he's attracted great musicians and great projects, and yeah, it's really he's very he's a very smart guy, very fortunate, you know.
I want to do a two piano concert with him the next time I'm over there.
Oh, cool.
I had started to put this in motion, unbeknownst to Phil, when I was there the last time, a year right before
Have you
COVID.
met him?
No, no.
Well, I'd be happy to introduce.
Never met. Yeah, Japan, great. I love the culture. I love the respect for the music there,
Me
and I
too.
played a number of times in with various people in various settings there.
It's it's such a it's a great community there, a great just interesting planet, as I always say. Definitely a
Yes, they
different
are
planet.
very self-contained.
Yeah, yeah. It's really an interesting. I really love it. I'd like to hear one of your compositions. Can you tell us, can you lead me towards that?
Are you going to access it on YouTube?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Um, I love this trio that I led for many years with Martin Wind on bass and Matt Wilson on drums. If you punch in my name and Snow Job, you'll get something on YouTube that's from a few years back.
Okay.
And we'll ask your listeners, it's a contrafact. We'll ask your listeners if they can see what well-known holiday tune it's built on. There, I'm gonna go with
Okay.
Snow Job.
All right. Snow Job. I love the title. It's a good title. How the heck did you come up with it listening to that song? You must have loved the form of the other song, which I know what it is.
Yeah.
But it took me, I have to say, three-quarters of the song to actually recognize because I was just digging what you wrote. Anybody, Sue said, my mind went right to the gutter with that title.
Yeah. One has,
Oh, Sue guessed.
yeah. Winter Wonderland.
Yeah,
Right. The bridge gives it away, if nothing else.
that was, yeah.
Yeah.
What a cool tune.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Snow Job. One has to be careful when announcing it.
Yes, one does.
Yeah. Matt Wilson. What a wonderful, loose musical drummer.
He
And
is.
Martin Wynn, great beat, great solos. I love him dearly.
Yeah, that's really quite beautiful. So, do you remember writing that song?
Yes, it was in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
I have a what I call my Canadian trio, which is Terry Clark, the drummer, and Neil Swainson bass. We've worked together for 30 years, mostly in Canada. I worked a lot with Terry when he lived in New York, and then he moved back up to Toronto. But we were doing a week at a club in Toronto, and it was a blinding snowstorm. And I went home after the gig, went back to the hotel, and wrote the piece in a few minutes, and I called it Snowed in Toronto. I took it into the club the next night, and we played it, and Terry said, "Great tune, Bill, but that's the wrong title." I said, "What should it be?" He said it should be called Snow Job. He gave it the title. So it is.
Yeah, man. Um, that's cool. Hey, show us your book.
Thought you'd never ask.
This is a very entertaining book. And the proceeds go to Musicians Emergency Fund,
Emergency Relief Fund.
Relief Fund. Yeah. So that's another reason to buy the book. It's a fun book. It's it's filled with stories that how did you put it?
Well, they're either you can't make this stuff up department is one chapter. There's another one called the Arranger's Corner. There's one called A Night at the Opera. There's one called Booze and Drugs, which is really funny. Stuff that you shouldn't do when you're a working musician that I did. And I tell the story and I learned my lesson, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a chapter called Strange Venues. We've all had them. I hear one.
Yeah, please.
This is short, one paragraph. I had the pleasure of working with Phil Woods' band the last 8 years of his life, the quintet. So this goes back to actually before I formally joined the band. It was the year 2000. So here's the story. The Phil Woods quintet was booked at a festival in Uruguay. It was held in, of all places, the middle of a cow pasture. The promoter, a jazz-loving rancher, held an annual event on his acreage out in the middle of nowhere. The stage and audience seats were in the midst of a big grazing field, and the musicians' green room was an old converted bunkhouse. During Phil's performance, seated at a gorgeous 9-foot Steinway grand, I looked up during a tune, and there was a huge heifer simultaneously chewing her cud and taking a leak, looking right at me and seeming to dig every note of all birds' children. Apparently, we were swinging till the cows came home.
Read us one more from somewhere, from one of those.
Oh, how about one about a singer?
Sure.
Okay. Vita Zadora. This is a good one. Well, I don't know where it is. Let's talk about something else while I'm looking for it.
Okay. I just can only just imagine the cow doing that.
Yeah, that's what they do. They love bebop and they love to take a leak while listening.
He's looking. What are you working on these days?
I'm mixing and editing a new album called Autumn Serenade. It's the shortest album I've ever done. It harkens back to LP days. It's 46 minutes long. I purposefully wanted to make an album that was short and with many of the tunes under 5 minutes. And to see if I could make a meaningful musical statement with short material. And it's a beautiful, I think, little vignette that starts with Autumn Serenade by Peter DeRose. It includes Autumn Nocturne. There's 2 Autumn Nocturnes, one by Frederick Myro that we all know. There's also a beautiful piece by pianist composer Bob James called Autumn Nocturne, and I put the 2 together. And I do a piece of mine, the only original on it, called Still Life. I do Wayne Shorter's Fall, and a tune by Shire and Maltby called Autumn that my wife sings. And then I end it with When October Goes. I'm singing the Barry Manilow and Johnny Mercer. Oh, I also sing on this album Henry Nemo's 'Tis Autumn. La-di-da, di-da-di-da, 'tis autumn.
I was part of a tribute to Henry Nemos for his family.
Were you really?
Yeah, that was a really interesting introduction. He was quite prolific.
What was he like?
Well, he wasn't alive, but
Oh,
he was. I was impressed with all the material that I hadn't known about him previously.
yeah.
His let's see, it was his daughter and son-in-law who did it, and I think it was his son-in-law who was a sculptor. It was a while ago, but it was a really interesting tribute.
I'm not aware of that much of his material. Autumn Serenade came to me through Johnny Hartman and Coltrane, I
Yeah.
think.
Uh-huh.
That's the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
And then I went online, and there are some really corny versions of it from,
Yeah.
because I think it was written for a Ziegfeld kind of show, if I'm not mistaken, in the 30s.
Yeah. Well, there was, yeah, a lot of, that time period and the material were, somewhat corny or vaudeville-ish. There was a bunch of that. But of course, being jazz players, you can make it into something really beautiful too.
Yeah, it's amazing when we look at some of our favorite, for example, Cole Porter tunes and hear the original versions, things that we take as seriously as they should be taken,
Yeah.
given what they are, but they're often cast in a real, by our standards now, kind of corny way, but it was for the show and it worked in the show. And
Yeah.
that's true of a lot of composers, of course.
Yeah.
I found the story.
Oh, good. Let's hear it.
This is, you can't make this up. During my Hollywood studio years, I sometimes was called to play the annual Jerry Lewis Muscular Dystrophy Telethon. It was a lengthy affair lasting over 24 hours. The big band would play dozens of acts, sometimes getting a quick rehearsal during commercials, but often sight reading the charts. It was challenging, and given the live aspect and the long hours, everyone's nerves were stretched. Several hours into it, Pia Zadora, who had just recorded an album, showed up to sing The Man Who Got Away. We were afforded a few minutes to rehearse her chart. She had among her entourage a personal assistant who would express the diva's needs and desires as if Zadora couldn't speak directly to the band. I played the solo piano intro as written. Pia, standing only 5 feet from me, said to her personal assistant, "Please tell the pianist to play the intro exactly as written." Ms. Zadora would like the intro as written. And then I said, "Please tell Ms. Zadora I'm playing the written notes of the intro exactly as the arranger has scored it." I played the intro again. Pia then whimpered, "Tell the pianist something's just not right." Ms. Zadora says something's just not right. Perhaps Ms. Zadora would like me to forget the written notes and, using the chord symbols provided, do something a little different. That was relayed, replayed, and again rejected. As I was about to try yet again, petulant Pia, almost stomping her foot, shouted, "I want it as written, note for note," to which I offered, via her PA, "Please tell Ms. Zadora I'll play it again exactly as written, every fucking note." The PA turned to her and said, "You heard him."
Wow.
I could have not been asked back with that retort, but I couldn't stand not doing it. It was so ridiculous.
Oh my God. What happened actually?
Precious. We were on. I mean, what happened after I said that?
Yeah, I mean, was she happy with what you played or?
She was just she had a hair up something that day. And after that exchange, I think the conductor said, let's go. And we did it. These things were crammed with talent. I mean, dozens and dozens of people over a 24-hour period would bring their charts in. And as I said in the story, you'd often have to sight read them. So we were in no mood to be toyed with, but that was too precious. Speaking to her PA back and forth.
One time I heard from a drummer who had worked with Neil Sedaka that Neil Sedaka was quite the character to work for. And he would actually be playing with an orchestra and change the key in the middle. And the whole orchestra was on alert, and they would have to change the key at a second.
What?
Yep.
Everybody would have to guess correctly where he went.
Well, I guess the conductor.
Flat. No, A.
Yeah. Apparently he was quite quite the character. There were other stories that I won't talk about, but there were. It was quite the. Speaking of Cole Porter, by the way, I woke up in the middle of the night a few weeks ago and just was like sitting at the piano playing through the real book, and unbelievably, I opened it up to a song I didn't know called "Could It Be You." Are you familiar with that one?
I think I've heard it, but I can't recall it.
What a beautiful song.
Was
It's
it?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's in Cole Porter's unusual approach and style, but it's the it shifts keys within it and the melody is it's not complicated, but it's surprising. The direction of the melody, you kind of would you think that the melody is going to go somehow different, and it doesn't. It goes in a different way. Also,
Oh,
at the end of the song, going back to the top, it's my inclination was to start higher on the melody. So anyway, it took me a little bit of time, but and beautiful lyrics too. It was really pretty, a very pretty song. And I just, when you know hundreds and hundreds of songs, you're always surprised.
did it have a verse?
Not in the real book, but
Yeah.
I bet it does.
Well, not all his did. Uh, could have been from a show or a standalone tune.
Yeah. Ross Tompkins once gave me which I have, and I'd be happy to share with you, um, this book of verses that one of his friends put together, hand wrote, and it's about 30 verses, something like that. I'll send that to you. I'm gonna
Love to see that.
make a note. Um,
I especially love Cole's verse on "Get Out of Town" and "Love for Sale."
I, I don't think I know the verse on "Get Out of Town."
Real sagas. I
Yeah,
can't.
"Love
I
for
can't,
Sale" is a good one.
I can't quote it to you right now, but it's always impressed me. And I do sing it. I sing that tune. I've taken to singing in the last few
I was going to
albums.
say, your singing actually is really enjoyable. You're first of all you're swinging, and you're singing. It just sounds good, and you're really in the lyrics. It's really quite nice. And here, I'm just going to share this with you to show you the verses in this book.
Ah, I get a kick out of you. That's got a good one.
I will.
They're, they're not all Cole Porter.
No, not
Yeah,
all.
I see. Isn't it romantic? That's a great one. Yeah.
I think Mountain Greenery. I know that's a nice one.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll send this to you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
I started my debut, I think, on an LP of Morgana King's came about. I was a producer and arranger. It's an album she did called Simply Eloquent on the Muse label. And I had sent her the arrangements with a mock-up piano part weeks in advance. And one of the tunes was uh, Let's Call the Whole Thing Off. And it has a verse that we did. And we got in the studio and things were going swimmingly. We recorded half of it, half the album, and we started working on that. And she hadn't learned the verse. So I'm trying to teach it to her in the studio. I'm singing her the verse. She says, well, you sound great. You sing it. Without a blink of the eye, I told the engineer to roll the tape, and we did it, and we did it in one take. And I sing the whole verse, and then we back and forth on the "You Say Potato, You Say Potato," that business,
wow.
and that emboldened me to to sing on other albums. So, in fact, on my last release, I sang a piece that my wife wrote a beautiful lyric to called "Play Song," and that's on that record. And I also sang a tune on that record called "Calabrita," written for a little town in Greece that I was in and played a festival at. And so
Nice.
It
And
was such,
did you say you said your wife sings too?
yes, she's on the new record, singing this Shire and Maltby tune called Autumn. For many years, she was an opera singer and she had a cabaret act also, another part of her career, and stopped doing that and got into other fields. But I wanted to include her on this upcoming Autumn album. But, you know, going back to musicians who sing, it was people like Red Mitchell and Gerry Mulligan and Frischberg, of course, and Jimmy Rolls that were some of my inspirations and who actually encouraged me and gave me permission to sing. So I'm forever
Wow.
grateful.
No, I didn't know most of those guys sang, actually. Of course, Dave Frischberg. I was actually a waitress at Dante's when Dave kind of started singing more on gigs, you know?
Oh my God, that brings back memories. Dante, Harry Leverett.
Gary Leverett, man, the owner of Dante's.
Oh. Well, Red Mitchell, a lot of people don't know this, was a wonderful pianist, bebop pianist, and of course, a master bassist. He wrote about 75 songs. There's a folio of his work. Wonderful songs. One's called Simple Isn't Easy. Another one's called It's Time to Emulate the Japanese, paying homage to their vibe and their customs, their culture. He's got one that takes the critics to task in a very funny way. He wrote some very pithy, sensitive, balladic things. He wrote some hilarious, off the wall political things. He wrote a letter. I remember when we were working at Bradley's, he showed me a letter that he wrote to Brezhnev, and got a reply when Brezhnev was in charge.
Wow.
And of course, Gerry Mulligan, a lot of people don't know, but Gerry loved to sing. He wrote a show that was never produced, a Broadway show with Judy Holliday,
Oh,
with whom he was a couple.
yeah.
And Gerry would occasionally sing at the end of a concert.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody in Los Angeles that is of a certain age remembers Jimmy Rolls' singing.
Yes.
Well, every time you work with a singer, grab a piece of her music and learn the lyric.
And then, of course, there was his brilliant daughter, you know, who
Stacey,
sang
sure.
incredibly.
Loved her voice and her
Yeah.
horn playing.
Yeah, she was a great singer and horn player, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, Taylor's asking if you can say a few standards that you love, that you keep going back for inspiration.
Well, oh boy, what a question. That's a good one. Yes, I mean, Darn That Dream comes to mind, and I
Oh,
love to do it in a medley with the tune Dream,
uh,
the two of them together. Uh, Darn That Dream is a wonderful piece of writing. And regrettably, most jazz musicians play the wrong note in the sixth bar on the third beat. Boo da 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 da. That's the right note. Most people say boo dee da 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 da.
yeah, that's right.
But in the key of G, the right note there is an E note on a B flat diminished chord. And I recorded that on a couple of albums ago called Bill Mays Trio Live at Coda. Songs I keep coming back to. A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square
Mm.
is one that I keep revisiting. Goodness, Get Out of Town, Cole Porter. I love How Long Has This Been Going On by Gershwin's, both for the verse as well as the body of the tune. I'm a real verse fan.
The verse is
If the
beautiful with
verses,
that one.
if the verses, yeah. Mark Murphy was a great exponent of that tune. As a child, I was trotted out in velvet panties. How's that for an opening line? That's how to pull you in. What? And then it goes on of how he was smothered with kisses from his somebody and his aunties. And so as I take the verse to unfold, it's a person, a little boy who's been shown too much attention and has turned himself off to the possibility of love and good feelings, so that we get to the body of the tune. I could cry salty tears, where have I been all these years? When he starts to awaken to the thrill of a kiss and a second and a third. I also love to play standards by jazz composers. Like, for example, I can't play a concert without including a Wayne Shorter tune like Fee Fi Fo Fum or Speak No Evil or Fall. I often play something by Monk in a concert. I love to play Benny Golson's music.
Mm-hmm.
And my concerts typically include, stuff from the great American Songbook and jazz composers and some of my own material.
Yeah. That's what I do too.
I know you're very eclectic.
Yeah. I like,
I
you
mean,
know.
good God, you did Scarlatti.
Yeah,
And then
you
you
know
turned
why?
Claire
This is a
Fisher.
weird little story. So my piano tuner, every time he comes to tune the piano, he plays that song. And
Oh,
finally I was like, what is that song? It's so beautiful and it's in my key. It was written in my
oh,
key, which is weird. And he got me the music and it was just timely with the project and yeah, that's a really beautiful song, isn't it? Oh, and then I heard uh, ha- la 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 la, the
pianist,
classical player, yeah, play it.
lady or man?
Man, who was alive till
Brent,
probably more
Brent
recently.
Gould.
Um, Horowitz.
Oh,
I heard Horowitz play it alone, and it was jazz-like. It was so beautiful. He was so like he even changed something in it. You know, he was so comfortable with it and fluid. It was really beautiful.
he was so amazing. To play something like that, or to play Liebestrom at the end of a concert after he'd done the Liszt B minor sonata. I got to hear him once near the end of his life. At that point, he was only performing on Sundays at 4 p.m.
Huh.
He would not perform any other time or day of the week.
Oh,
Sundays. When I told Frischberg that, he said, everybody's got to have a gimmick.
wow.
And, Horowitz carried his own piano and his own piano tuner with him wherever he went, across country on a train.
Really? Wow.
Can you imagine the cartage bill?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine. I guess, you know, you might imagine that that he didn't make as much as he would have. Let's put it that way.
50,000 a concert at the end of his life, which at that time was purportedly one of the biggest fees for concert performers. I'm
Huh.
talking the 70s.
Wow, interesting. Let's see. So, um, let's see. So I know what you're doing now, and part of the time you live in New York or New Jersey?
I'm in back and forth between New York City and a little tiny mountain cabin in Shahola, Pennsylvania, where I am now. I'm in my music room.
Oh,
It's almost as big as the house.
huh.
And it's a beautiful spot with a lot of wildlife. As I look out the window right now, I can see a mother with two fawns. We have
Oh,
deer and Pennsylvania black bear and fox, and it runs the gamut. Just 90 minutes from Manhattan.
That's lovely. I played at the Deerhead in June.
I know you did. I wanted to come and I was otherwise engaged.
It was so
You-
nice. It was
Did you
beautiful.
enjoy it?
I really did. And I'm sorry I didn't call you to do the gig. You were on my short list, actually. And just, how things work out in whatever way they work out. But
Sure.
yeah, I was very moved by the whole experience. It was just, it was love. I mean, it's been a long time since I hung out on the East Coast a lot. I'm from Boston. So I went to New York first, hung out with Jay Clayton, and I did a gig there with Jim Riddle. And yeah, and
Box.
yeah, that was great. And we went and hung out, and then went to Boston for my 50th reunion, and so hung out with family and friends, and then did a lot of driving, and then went down to the Deerhead, like by the Hudson, and visited Judy and Joe
By the
Lovano.
Delaware. Oh,
Yeah,
Judy and Joe Lovano?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they live in, wow, their house and yard is really cool. And then the Deerhead, and it was so much fun, and hung out with Bill Goodwin and Mike Steffens, and it was. I went home. I felt like I shifted somehow, especially because of the green and the water. I just miss that so much.
The color and yeah, it's a whole different vibe. And that place has so much history, it's really been there. They call it home of, what do they say? Home of jazz in the Poconos for
Yeah,
over 80 years.
yeah,
A wonderful John Coates, pianist, was one of the first people there back when. And then Phil Woods, when he resettled just
yeah.
up the block from the Deerhead, was very instrumental in the jazz community there. He founded a festival that's held every September, the Coda Festival. And subsequently, his band all moved there. Goodwin and Steve Gilmore, who now lives in Florida. Steve does.
Yeah.
And I'm where I am in Pennsylvania is the northern Poconos. I'm about an hour north of the Deerhead.
Okay.
And that's Phil Woods's piano at the Deerhead.
I
He
heard
donated that
Yeah.
lovely Yamaha. Yeah, it's a soulful place. Did you stay there
Yes.
in one of the rooms?
On the fourth floor.
Oh,
Int- Interest. I mean, I wouldn't have minded, but it was hard with the baggage going up and down because no elevator.
yeah. No.
And you must know Nancy Reed.
Reed,
Yeah.
Inspector.
So we hung out with them a little bit, and she's such a good singer.
Yes.
I mean, they're so into the music, and it's great. Very nice people.
Yeah, there's a whole coterie of musicians who live within an hour of the Deerhead.
Yeah.
Fred Hirsch has a place here, Phil Markowitz, uh, the list goes on.
It feels like it's in the middle of nowhere, but it's kind of not really, right?
Well,
Because
it's just an hour and a half on the freeway from New York,
yeah,
just like getting from Santa Monica to San Gabriel on a heavy work day. San Gabriel. I went to grammar school in Temple City
wow.
and high school in Monrovia before we moved to the Bay Area.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Sue is asking, so do you have two grands?
I
And do you
do.
still live near her old pad by the Lincoln Center?
Yeah. I don't live, that apartment got sold years ago, and I have a grand there, a Steinway M, and I have a Steinway B right there. I do a lot of two piano playing,
Ah,
nothing but classical literature. There's a fine pianist here in the Northeast named Russ Kassoff, with whom I'm affiliated, and a fella in West Palm Beach, Florida, Mark Marino. And this kind of, it started before COVID. I mean, I've owned two pianos for many years, and I've played with people casually like Fred Hirsch and Don Friedman when he was alive, and various people. You know, we would just get together occasionally and play tunes. But I started pursuing classical two piano literature quite seriously just before COVID hit, and started working on these pieces with this fella in Florida, Mozart, Bartok, Samuel Barber, to name a few, Ravel, and then it carried over into performing, you know, for friends. And we haven't recorded any of this material, but it's just for our pleasure and to keep my chops at a different level than they would be if I was just playing jazz. So, boy, that was a long answer.
But a good answer.
But a good answer.
Roland actually would like. Roland, did you hear that he played with Zappa? So, how did that trombone end up on the rafter?
Oh, you see that? Oh, there it is. Isn't that wonderful? It's a silver valve trombone, and it belonged to my father. My father was for many years a minister, and later a life insurance salesman with Equitable. In his ministry, he often played the piano, the organ, the accordion, the guitar with a harmonica around his head.
Wow.
And the valve trombone.
Wow.
And one of my great pleasures in life was to hip him to the music of Bob Brookmeyer and Frank Rosolino and Stu Enevoldsen, just to name a few. And he passed away a few years ago, and I took possession of the trombone, and there it sits.
Wow, your dad, man.
He was something. He was had a lot of humor.
I was gonna say you must have got your humor from him, I bet.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
both my folks. He was a great guy. He would take his trombone in a paper sack because he didn't have a proper case. He was in a retirement home in San Diego at the end of his life, and he would play every Thursday in the Alzheimer's wing, solo trombone. When I'd go to visit, I'd go with him, and we'd play tunes on this broken down spinet and his trombone, and he only knew a dozen songs. Onward Christian Soldiers, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning, I'll Be Loving You Always. I said, Dad, why don't you learn some new material? He says, every time I play it for him, it's new. My paternal grandmother was a pianist and a lyric writer, and her father was a sacred songwriter. He wrote a lot of songs that became famous in the Protestant church world. One's called How Great Thou Art.
Really?
And
Wow.
another one, The Love of God, is another hit
Wow.
of a hymnal hit.
Wow.
In fact, my folks were still getting royalty checks of 52 cents, 67 cents a few years ago for those songs.
Wow, that's kind of impressive, man.
Musical background.
By the way, Sue says Steve Sandberg does a lot of classical too. I guess you know who that is.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you can get me to it.
Here's a Taylor question. Let's see. Which question? I like the writer's block. He wants to know what you do when you have writer's block.
Sometimes I get writer's block because I've been writing too much,
Oh,
believe it or not. And that goes along with sometimes I can practice too much. And I find it if I have a big concert coming up, sometimes the best thing I can do is to not play the piano for 4 days before the concert, and I hit it really fresh.
Yeah.
Sometimes I solve writer's block by just pulling away for a couple, 3 days. The other thing about writing, and this is something that Bob Brookmeyer gave to me, it's important just to write something, write anything when you're feeling stuck. And Bob said, hard to believe, but he said when he has an assignment, he would write just to get all the juices going and to get the bullshit out. He would throw away everything he wrote the first day or maybe 2 days. He wouldn't even look at it and, is this worth keeping? Should I put it in a folder? And no, he just toss it. That takes some courage, I think. And Bob, one of the things that he did at the BMI Writers Workshop was to say, take a simple musical cell of just 3 notes. He was very specific, not 2, not 4, not 5. Take 3 notes, any 3 notes. He even said it could be 3 blind mice. Boo, da, 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 da. And when you're feeling stuck, see how many different ways you can invert that, put it on different pitch levels, obviously, turn it around. And what that'll do, ideas will start to generate from that. Another thing that I know Fred Hirsch espouses, and I tried this, and it was fascinating, the results that I came up with. On a piece of paper, I write 12 little pieces of paper. I write the 12 tones of the chromatic scale, put them in a paper bag, and pull them out at random and put them in an order and go with that and see where it takes me. It might turn into something like a song that is on my, I haven't recorded this yet. It's called 12 Steps.
Huh.
And it's built on a 12-tone row. And I chose those 12 tones by reaching into the paper bag and pulling them out. It was totally by chance. Let's see if we can make music out of this. I did. It turned out to be a lovely composition. Sometimes what you come up with will have nothing to do with what you pulled out of the bag, but it'll lead you somewhere. I think one of the problems is when you're lacking inspiration is just to sit around and moan about it and not do anything. Instead, as I said, try walking away for a couple of days or just start writing anything. We tend to get married to all of our ideas and we feel like we can't throw anything away. And
that's so true.
So I do that. I practice that. Sometimes I throw things away. I also keep a notebook and I came across something the other month that was 20 years ago and a composition came out of it. And at first I felt like, but I came up with this 20 years ago, I shouldn't use it. And there's the editor on your constantly shooting.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember I was writing and I kept coming up with folk material, and the editor was saying, it's not jazz, and pretty soon I wasn't writing for a year. And a year later, somebody said something to me, like a sentence, and I realized what I had done. I had stopped the muse, and then I started writing and, so what? Throw it away or give it away to somebody or save it for some folk person or it doesn't matter. And then the other thing that it was significant to me recently was Elizabeth Gilbert is the author who wrote Eat, Pray, and Love. And she wrote a book after that called Big Magic, which basically gives you permission to be creative. And she said in that when she was young, she decided she was going to be a writer. She committed to writing every day, no matter how long. And what she discovered was every time she would start something, she'd like it at first, and then about 2 or 3 days in, she'd kind of be disgusted. But because she was writing the next day,
Yeah.
it would just continue and grow. And she wouldn't have known that if she hadn't been writing every day.
I think that's a really, I don't, but I think that's a really good goal to try to write something every day.
Yeah.
I know the bassist, Professor Bruce Gertz, a bassist and professor at Berkeley
I
School,
know him, yeah.
does that, something every day. Matt Wilson, the drummer, composer, band leader, set himself a goal at one time of taking 10 minutes and only 10 minutes and coming up with something. And he brought in some of the things that he did in 10 minutes, and some of them were wonderful. And that concept inspired my friend and bassist Martin Wynn to write a piece called 10-Minute Song. He went down into the basement, set the timer, and I'm going to come up with something in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I was working on a song. I happened to finally sit down and look through a whole bunch of stuff, and I realized that a song that I'd written a long time ago, I wanted to put in a lower key. And as I was putting it into a lower key, I remembered when I wrote it. I wrote it driving on the 405 in about 2 minutes. The whole thing, lyrics, melody, everything just kind of poured out, and there it was, you know.
That's wonderful. I know I've had that experience where a song comes out in 15 or 30 minutes, and then there are others that take a couple hours and I have 8 bars and
Or a few months later. So did you work with Zappa, or did you record, or what did you do with Zappa?
well, both, but it was a very specific project in a limited time. It was, I can't remember the year, I could look it up, in the mid 70s. And Frank had written a modern classical piece for orchestra, as he called it. And I don't remember that he played guitar, he just conducted. And he hired me and 3 other keyboard players, and we all played clavinet.
Oh,
The clavinet, as some of you might not know, is an instrument that has to be amplified to be heard. And it was used a lot in pop music, often with a wah-wah pedal. Stevie Wonder used the clavinet on some of his recordings, Billy Preston, just to name a couple. And Frank used 4 clavinet players. Everything was specifically written out, and each clavinet was processed various ways with wah-wah pedals, phase shifters, ring modulators, all kinds of devices to electronically alter the sound.
Huh.
And the album, let me get this to show you. Album came out years later in a collection of Zappa pieces. That's, what is it called? One Shot Deal is the name of the album. And it's a collection of stuff. And I think that there are 3 tracks on this compilation from that concert. As I remember, we played at Royce Hall at UCLA and a few other venues in Los Angeles. And the whole thing was recorded, but I don't know that the whole thing was ever released. I think it came out piecemeal.
Did you enjoy working with Zappa?
Well, I did, in the sense that I always enjoy a reading challenge, and this music was very difficult. We probably had gotten it in front and had time to rehearse it at home. I enjoyed his conducting. I enjoyed his professionalism. And as I remember, the music fascinated me. It was quite unorthodox and just showed me what a wide, diverse mind he had.
Interesting.
That was it. I never heard from him again.
Yeah, I've had
Never write, you never call. Hey,
Frankie, baby.
Frankie, baby.
Well, I want to thank you for giving me 2 hours here. I know, you had something to
Did
do.
we?
We
My
shifted.
goodness.
Isn't
What
it's
is it?
amazing, huh? It's very comfortable. We could talk more, and we should talk more. But thanks for being on and moving the time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing what you do, not just this noontime hang, but all of your efforts for
Thanks.
the music community and teaching and helping people realize their potential, helping them kill the editor that sits on the shoulder and wants to shame them or make them fearful. You do that in your work, and it's so needed. Thank you so much for doing this,
Thanks, Bill. It's
and for
very
the
sweet of
beautiful
you to say.
records that you keep on
Thank
making.
you. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, it's been really nice to catch up with you. It's been so long, and to hear all your music and your thoughts. It's
Thank you. Well,
beautiful.
look for the new album. I don't know where it's going to come out. People don't buy CDs much anymore, I'm told. And I have two labels I'm talking to, but what will they distribute?
Yeah,
I can put it up on Bandcamp or
yeah.
Dis DistroKid or something. So I don't know, but it'll be called Autumn Serenade, and hopefully we'll get it out by autumn,
By this autumn?
which is 6 weeks away. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear that.
Thank
Um, okay, and tomorrow, guys, a wonderful cellist who a lot of jazz people have used him over the last, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Artyom Manoukian, and recently he moved actually back to Armenia, but he's in LA right now doing some work. But he's one of those players who's been invited to do a lot of beautiful things. He's a great player.
I can't wait to hear more about him.
Yeah, so he'll be on tomorrow, and then we'll get into some archives the rest of the week. But thanks again for being on, Bill. So nice to talk to you and hear you.
Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Have a great